Ambassador Zethkari had seen many worlds during his long service to the Galactic Council. His blue skin had grown pale from countless diplomatic missions, and his 4 eyes had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. But nothing had prepared him for what he was about to see. On this small human colony world, the shuttle landed, with a soft thud on the rocky ground of Kepler 442b. Dust swirled around the landing gear as Zethkari stepped out, his breathing apparatus adjusting to the thin atmosphere. The human settlement stretched before him like a small city made of metal and glass. It looked peaceful enough. "Welcome to New Haven," said the human who greeted him. The man was tall and pale, with short brown hair and strange flat teeth when he smiled. "I'm Governor Chen. We're honored to have the council visit our little world." Zethkari bowed in the traditional council manner. "Thank you for accepting our diplomatic mission. The council is always pleased to meet new species who wish to join our alliance." The tour began well. Governor Chen showed him their farms, their schools, their small factories. The humans seemed friendly and intelligent. They had only been on this world for 50 years, but they had built something impressive. Zethkari made notes on his tablet, writing positive things about these newcomers. "How many humans live here?" Zethkari asked as they walked past a playground where human children played strange games. "About 200,000, Chen replied. "We're still growing. More ships arrive every few months with new families. And for protection, do you have a militia?" Chen's smile changed slightly. "We have some security forces. Nothing too serious. Just enough to handle the occasional problem." They were having lunch when the alarm started. The sound was loud and piercing, making Zethkari's 4 ears hurt. Governor Chen stood up quickly, his face suddenly hard. Other humans around them were moving fast, but they did not look panicked. They looked angry. "Pirates," Chen said simply. "They hit the outer settlements sometimes. Don't worry, Ambassador. Our people will handle this." Through the window, Zethkari could see ships in the sky. They were crude vessels, the kind used by the raider gangs that plagued the outer rim. He counted 12 ships, maybe more. This was a serious attack. "Should we contact the council fleet?" Zethkari asked. "I can call for help." "No need," Chen said. He was speaking into a small device. "Colonel Martinez, we have guests. Please keep things clean." A woman's voice came back through the device. "Copy that, Governor. We'll wrap this up quick." Zethkari watched through the window as human aircraft rose from hidden positions around the settlement. They were sleek and fast, unlike anything in the council databases. The pirate ships were larger, but they moved like clumsy beasts compared to the human fighters. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. Zethkari had seen space combat before. Usually it involved long-range weapons and careful positioning. Ships would fire at each other from great distances, trying to wear down shields and armor. It was almost like a dance, with both sides circling and testing each other. This was not a dance. This was slaughter. The human fighters moved in perfect formation, striking the pirate ships with surgical precision. They did not circle or test. They attacked like predators hunting prey. One after another, the pirate vessels exploded or crashed to the ground in flames. "Impressive," Zethkari said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Your pilots are very skilled." Governor Chen was watching the battle with calm eyes. "They're good kids. Most of them learned to fly in the military before coming here." "Military?" "Earth's armed forces. Standard training for our fighter pilots includes combat experience. These particular pilots served in our regular infantry before transferring to air support." Regular infantry. Zethkari made a note of that phrase. These skilled pilots had started as ground soldiers. The last pirate ship tried to escape, but it never made it to space. A human fighter caught it just above the atmosphere and sent it tumbling back down in pieces. "Clean sweep," came Colonel Martinez's voice through Chen's device. "No survivors, no survivors." Zethkari felt a chill that had nothing to do with the thin air. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we clean up the mess and get back to work," Chen said. "The salvage crews will strip anything useful from the wrecks. The rest gets recycled." A few hours later, Zethkari met Colonel Martinez. She was a small woman with dark skin and quiet eyes that seemed to see everything. Her uniform was simple and practical, not fancy like the dress uniforms of council officers. "I hope the noise didn't disturb your visit, Ambassador," she said. "We try to keep these incidents away from the main settlement." "Your response was very effective," Zethkari replied carefully. "The council's records show these pirate gangs are usually quite dangerous." Colonel Martinez nodded. "The Crimson Fleet, We've tangled with them before. They like to hit isolated colonies, take what they can and run. They weren't expecting organized resistance. How many soldiers do you have here? About 500 active personnel. Mix of infantry, support, and aircrew. All volunteers from Earth's regular forces who wanted to try colonial life. 500. The pirate fleet had probably carried 3,000 raiders. The math made no sense by council standards. Your soldiers are very well trained, Zethkari observed. Martinez shrugged. Basic Earth military training. Nothing special. Most of these folks served a standard tour in the regular army before mustering out to civilian life. They keep their skills sharp with monthly exercises. Nothing special. Regular army. Basic training. That evening, Zethkari sent his first report back to the council. He chose his words carefully, but the message was clear. Humanity's normal military forces were unlike anything in the known galaxy. The next day brought more revelations. During his tour of the settlement's defenses, Zethkari discovered that the humans had built their entire colony as a fortress. Every building could become a defensive position. Every road was designed to funnel attackers into kill zones. The whole settlement was a trap waiting to be sprung. Is this normal for human colonies? He asked Governor Chen. Pretty standard, Chen replied. We learned a long time ago that it's better to be prepared. Our ancestors had to deal with some tough situations on Earth. We apply those lessons everywhere we go. What kind of situations? Chen was quiet for a moment. Wars, mostly. Humans are good at fighting, Ambassador. We've had a lot of practice. That afternoon, Zethkari observed a training exercise. Human soldiers moved through mock battles with a precision that made his skin crawl. They worked together like parts of a single organism, covering each other, communicating without words, adapting to changing situations in seconds. One squad was practicing room-clearing techniques in a mock building. Zethkari watched them flow through doorways like deadly water, eliminating targets with quick, efficient movements. Their weapons were accurate to a degree that seemed impossible. How long do they train for this? He asked Colonel Martinez. Basic infantry training is about 4 months on Earth, she said. Then they get specialized training based on their assignment. These particular soldiers have been together for about 2 years. 4 months of basic training. 2 years of working together. And they fought like legends. But the most disturbing thing came during dinner on his final night. Zethkari was eating with a group of human soldiers, trying to understand their culture. They were friendly and relaxed, nothing like the efficient killers he had watched in training. One young soldier was telling a funny story about his training days on Earth. The drill sergeant kept yelling at us about attention to detail, said if we couldn't handle basic infantry training, we'd never make it into special forces. Special forces? Zethkari asked. The conversation stopped. The humans looked at each other with expressions he could not read. Elite units, one of them finally explained. Different training, different missions. Most of us regular army folks never see them in action. Are there special forces soldiers on this world? No, Colonel Martinez said quickly. Just regular infantry, support personnel, and pilots. Special forces handle different kinds of operations. After dinner, Zethkari walked alone through the settlement. His mind was spinning with questions. If these humans were just regular soldiers, what were their elite forces like? What kind of threats required training beyond what he had witnessed? He found his answer in an intercepted communication that his shuttle's equipment picked up by accident. 2 human officers were discussing a situation on another world, far from this peaceful colony. Command says the Rigel incident is getting out of hand, one voice said. Local authorities can't handle it. Are they sending reinforcements? The second voice asked. Better. Special Forces team ships out tomorrow. Should be wrapped up in a week. Poor bastards, the first voice said. They have no idea what's coming. The transmission ended, leaving Zethkari staring at his equipment. Somewhere in the galaxy, humans were deploying these mysterious special forces to handle a situation that regular authorities could not manage. As his shuttle prepared to leave Kepler 442b the next morning, Governor Chen shook his hand in the human custom. I hope your report to the council will be favorable, Chen said. We'd like to join the galactic community. I will recommend that humanity be welcomed into the council, Zethkari replied. It was the truth, though perhaps not for the reasons Chen expected. As the shuttle lifted off, Zethkari looked down at New Haven one last time. The settlement looked peaceful in the morning light. Children played in the streets. Workers tended their farms. It was hard to believe that this quiet place was defended by warriors who could destroy a pirate fleet without breaking a sweat. The flight back to council space gave him time to think. His report would shake the foundations of galactic politics. For centuries, the council had maintained peace through careful balance. No one species was allowed to become too powerful. Military forces were regulated, standardized, predictable. Humanity changed everything. Their regular soldiers fought with a skill and ferocity that surpassed the elite units of other species. They planned like generals, fought like demons, and built their homes like fortresses. And according to them, this was normal. What were their special forces like? 3 days later, Zethkari stood before the council assembly on the great station at Centauri Prime. Representatives from 100 worlds listened as he delivered his report. The chamber grew quieter with each detail he shared. In conclusion, he said, I recommend that humanity be granted full council membership immediately, but I also recommend that we treat their military capabilities as a matter of galactic security. The questions came fast and sharp. You say their pilots were former infantry soldiers? Yes, standard career path for human military personnel. And they destroyed 12 pirate vessels without losses? In 17 minutes. What about their ground forces? Every human civilian I met had some form of military training. Their soldiers train constantly and treat combat as a science to be perfected. The hegemony representative, a large reptilian being named Korath, stood up. Ambassador Zethkari, in your opinion, could humanity threaten council security? Zethkari considered his words carefully. Honorable Korath, based on what I observed, humanity's regular military forces could probably conquer half the council worlds without significant effort. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives demanded details, questioned his judgment, and called for immediate action. Through the chaos, Zethkari heard one comment that made his blood freeze. The human liaison officer, a quiet woman who had been taking notes throughout the session, leaned over to her aide and whispered, "Wait until they find out about special forces." Zethkari closed his eyes. Somewhere in the galaxy, humanity had military units that made their regular army look ordinary. The same regular army that could apparently conquer half of known space. What had the council gotten itself into? The session ended with more questions than answers. Committees were formed. Security briefings were scheduled. Emergency protocols were activated. But through it all, one thought kept echoing in Zethkari's mind. If humanity's common soldiers were this dangerous, what horrors awaited any fool who made them angry enough to deploy their special forces? The council's decision came 3 weeks after Ambassador Zethkari's report. The debate had raged for days in closed sessions, with representatives arguing about humanity's place in the galaxy. Some wanted to welcome them immediately. Others demanded restrictions. A few suggested they should be contained. General Korath of the Hegemony Guard had a different idea. We test them, he announced to the emergency session. A controlled military exercise. Our best against their regular forces. We need to know what we're dealing with. The chamber buzzed with discussion. Korath was known for his strategic mind and his species' warrior culture. If anyone could judge human military capability, it would be him. What do you propose? Asked Councillor Vex, the Assembly's current leader. Vega Prime, Korath said. The contested world. Pirates, smugglers, and rebels have been fighting over it for years. We send a joint force. 500 of my Hegemony Guard and 50 human soldiers. Clean up the planet together. See how they fight. 50 humans against 500 of your warriors. The question came from Councillor Thane, whose people were known for their careful calculations. Korath's reptilian face showed what might have been a smile. According to Zethkari's report, 50 should be more than enough. If the humans are half as good as he claims, my warriors might actually learn something. 2 weeks later, the joint fleet arrived at Vega Prime. The planet was a mess of competing factions and lawless territories. Perfect for a military demonstration. Captain Sarah Chen stepped off the human transport ship and looked around the command center that had been set up in orbit. She was young for a company commander, maybe 30 years old, with the calm confidence that Zethkari had noticed in all human soldiers. Captain Chen. Korath greeted her with a respectful nod. Welcome to Operation Clear Sky, General, she replied. My Marines are ready for deployment. Korath studied the humans as they prepared their equipment. 50 soldiers just as planned. They moved with the same efficient precision that Zethkari had described, checking weapons and gear with practiced motions. "I've read the reports about your people," Korath said. "Impressive performance against the pirates at New Haven." Captain Chen shrugged. "Standard patrol action, sir. Nothing too exciting, nothing too exciting." Korath kept his expression neutral, but internally he was fascinated. These humans treated the destruction of 12 pirate ships like a routine training exercise. The mission briefing was held in the main conference room. Holographic displays showed Vega Prime's surface, marked with enemy positions and strategic objectives. 3 major hostile groups, explained Major Voss, the Council's intelligence officer. The Red Claw pirates control the northern continent. About 2,000 fighters with stolen military equipment. The separatist rebels hold the southern cities. Maybe 1,500 troops well organized. And the Smugglers' Alliance runs the spaceports. They've got maybe 1,000 mercenaries. Korath nodded. Standard procedure is to establish base camps, then conduct systematic clearing operations. Estimated time for full pacification is 6 to 8 months. Captain Chen raised her hand. "General, permission to speak?" "Granted. 6 months seems long. My Marines could probably wrap this up in 2 weeks." The room went quiet. Every council officer was staring at the small human woman who had just suggested that 50 soldiers could accomplish what normally took multiple divisions. "Explain your reasoning." "Captain," Korath said carefully. Chen moved to the holographic display and pointed at the enemy positions. "The 3 groups hate each other as much as they hate the Council. They're not coordinating their defenses. We hit them fast and hard one at a time before they can organize a united response. And if they do unite against us, then we adjust tactics and hit them harder. Hit them harder." Korath was beginning to understand why Zethkari had been so disturbed by his visit to the human colony. The deployment began the next morning. Korath's Hegemony Guard established a fortified base camp in the planet's equatorial region, following standard Council military doctrine, heavy defenses, supply lines, and careful positioning. The humans did something different. Captain Chen split her 50 Marines into 5 teams of 10 soldiers each. They scattered across the planet like seeds in the wind, establishing small outposts in seemingly random locations. "Captain," Korath called her on the communication system, "your forces are spread very thin. Standard doctrine calls for concentrated defensive positions. Respectfully, General, we're not here to defend. We're here to attack." Within 6 hours, the attacks began. Team Alpha hit a Red Claw supply depot in the northern mountains. 10 human Marines against 200 pirates. Korath watched through orbital surveillance as the humans moved through the facility like ghosts, eliminating sentries and destroying equipment with surgical precision. The pirates never knew what hit them. One moment they were guarding their supplies. The next moment everything was exploding and their guards were gone. The Marines vanished into the wilderness before reinforcements could arrive. Team Beta struck a separatist communication center. Team Charlie destroyed a smuggler weapons cache. Team Delta sabotaged a pirate airfield. Team Echo hit a rebel command post, all within 12 hours of landing. "Impossible," muttered Major Voss, staring at the tactical displays. "They're moving too fast. No force can maintain that operational tempo." But the humans were just getting started. Day 2 brought larger operations. The Red Claw pirates sent a full battalion to hunt down the Marines who had hit their supply depot. They found Team Alpha waiting in a canyon pass, positioned on the high ground with perfect fields of fire. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When it was over, the pirate battalion had ceased to exist. Team Alpha had suffered 0 casualties and captured enough equipment to arm a small army. "How?" Korath demanded when Captain Chen reported in. "How did 10 soldiers destroy 200 experienced fighters?" "Training, sir," Chen replied calmly. "My Marines train for outnumbered situations. It's what we do." The Council officers began to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Human soldiers didn't just fight. They thought. They adapted. They turned every disadvantage into an opportunity. On day 3, the enemy factions did exactly what Chen had predicted. Faced with an enemy they couldn't understand, they began working together. The Red Claw pirates, separatist rebels, and Smugglers' Alliance formed a temporary alliance to deal with the human threat. 3,000 fighters moving toward your positions. Korath warned Chen. "You should fall back to our base camp." "Negative, General. We're right where we want to be." The combined enemy force moved through the continent's central valley. heading toward the last known human position. They outnumbered the Marines 60-1. They had heavy weapons, armored vehicles, and air support. They walked into a masterpiece of tactical destruction. The humans had spent 3 days preparing the battlefield. Every road was mined. Every bridge was rigged to explode. Every hill concealed firing positions. The enemy alliance found themselves trapped in a killing ground with no way out. But the most terrifying thing was not the preparation. It was the execution. The Marines fought like demons, but they fought smart. They used the enemy's numbers against them, creating traffic jams and confusion. They targeted leaders first, cutting off communication and command. They moved constantly, never staying in one position long enough to be pinned down, and they never stopped. Other species fought until they were tired, then rested. Humans seemed to fight harder the longer the battle lasted. They drew strength from combat, becoming more dangerous as the fighting intensified. Korath watched from orbit as his most fundamental beliefs about warfare crumbled. The Hegemony Guard were considered the finest warriors in the galaxy, trained from birth for combat. But these human Marines fought with a combination of intelligence, aggression, and endurance that defied everything he thought he knew about military science. The battle ended when the surviving enemies surrendered. Not to the Council forces, but specifically to the humans. Captain Chen accepted the surrender with the same calm professionalism she showed in everything else. But Korath noticed something in the way the enemy fighters looked at her. They were not just defeated. They were awed. "Captain," he called her as the Marines were processing prisoners. "A word in private?" They walked away from the main group, into the ruins of what had once been a separatist stronghold. "How?" Korath asked simply. Chen looked confused. "Sir? How did 50 soldiers defeat 3,000 enemies? My tactical computers cannot explain what I just witnessed." Standard Marine Corps doctrine, General. Small unit tactics combined with mobility and aggressive action. We learned this in basic training. Basic training. Again. "Captain, I need to ask you something directly. Are you Special Forces?" Chen laughed, a sound that was both amused and slightly disturbing. "No, sir, regular Marines. 3rd Battalion, 2nd Division. We're just grunts who signed up for colonial duty." "Then what are Special Forces like?" The laughter stopped. Chen's expression became serious, almost thoughtful. "I've never worked with them directly," she said slowly. "Different mission parameters. But from what I understand, Special Forces handle situations that regular Marines can't manage." "What situations could you not manage?" "That's classified above my pay grade, sir, but..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Let me put it this way. Marines like us are trained to fight enemies. Special Forces are trained to fight wars that other people don't even know are happening." That evening, Korath sent his report to the Council. The joint operation had been a complete success. Vega Prime was pacified in 4 days instead of 8 months. Enemy casualties were over 90%. Human casualties were 0, but the numbers did not capture the real lesson. Korath had brought 500 of his best warriors to test 50 human Marines. His soldiers had barely fired a shot. They had watched from their carefully prepared defensive positions as the humans redefined the concept of warfare. The demonstration was over, but the education had just begun. "General," Captain Chen approached him as the transports prepared to leave. "Thank you for including us in this operation. My Marines learned a lot working alongside the Hegemony Guard." "What did they learn?" "How other species approach tactical problems. It's always educational to see different perspectives on combat. Different perspectives, as if the systematic destruction of 3,000 enemies was simply an alternative viewpoint." "Captain, one final question. You mentioned that this was routine for your Marines. What would you consider a challenging mission?" Chen thought for a moment. "Something that required us to actually try, I suppose. This was more like a training exercise. My Marines were hoping for something that would test their skills." A training exercise. Korath felt something cold settle in his chest. As the human transport departed, Korath stood in the command center and reviewed the tactical recordings one more time. 50 Marines had just demonstrated combat capabilities that surpassed anything in Council experience, and according to them, this was routine. His communication officer approached with a message from Council headquarters. "Sir, priority transmission from Central Command." Korath read the message twice to make sure he understood it correctly. Intelligence had intercepted human military communications about a developing situation in the Outer Rim. Something about a colony that had gone silent, possibly hostile alien contact. The humans were deploying special forces. "Sir?" the communication officer asked. "Any response?" Korath looked out at the stars, wondering what kind of threat could require capabilities beyond what he had just witnessed. Somewhere out there, humanity was sending soldiers who made these Marines look ordinary. "Yes," he said finally. "Send a message to all Council fleets. If they encounter human Special Forces operations, they are to observe from maximum safe distance and report immediately. Under no circumstances are they to interfere." "Sir, what should we consider maximum safe distance?" Korath thought about 50 Marines destroying 3,000 enemies in 4 days. Then he thought about soldiers who were trained for missions that these Marines could not handle. "Different star system," he said. "Maybe different sector. We'll figure out the safe distance after we see what they can do." The communication officer looked confused, but transmitted the orders. Across the galaxy, Council forces received new instructions about humanity's mysterious special forces, instructions that would soon prove to be inadequate. The news traveled fast across the galaxy. Within a month of the Vega Prime operation, every species in Council space had heard about humanity's military demonstration. 50 human Marines had accomplished what should have required 10,000 regular troops. The reactions were mixed, but they all carried the same underlying current: fear. On the trade world of Nexus 7, Captain Jirix of the foreign merchant fleet was hiring protection for a dangerous cargo run through pirate territory. He had planned to hire a full company of Council security forces, but his business partner had a different suggestion. "Get humans," the partner said. "They're expensive but worth it." "How many?" 10 should be enough. Maybe 5 if you want to save money." Captain Jirix stared at his partner. 5 soldiers to guard a convoy through the Blood Nebula? That's suicide. Not if they're human. 3 days later, Jirix watched 5 human mercenaries board his lead ship. They looked ordinary enough. Standard combat armor, normal weapons, quiet professional demeanor. Nothing that screamed super warrior. The convoy entered the Blood Nebula 2 weeks later. The nebula was notorious for pirate attacks, with gas clouds that blocked sensors and asteroid fields that provided perfect ambush points. Most merchant fleets hired at least 50 guards for this route. The first attack came 6 hours into the nebula. 15 pirate ships surrounded the convoy, demanding surrender and cargo. Captain Jirix prepared to negotiate the usual tribute payment. "Negative," came a calm voice from the human team leader. "We've got this." What happened next became legend among the merchant fleets. The 5 humans launched in a single small fighter craft and engaged 15 pirate ships in direct combat. The battle lasted 12 minutes. When it was over, 14 pirate ships were debris. The 15th was limping away at maximum speed, broadcasting a warning to all pirate frequencies: "Don't mess with human-protected convoys." Captain Jirix sent the combat recordings to every merchant he knew. Within days, human mercenaries were the most requested protection service in the galaxy. Their prices tripled, then tripled again. They still had more work than they could handle. On the warrior world of Cathara, the situation was different but equally disturbing. The Catharan people had built their entire culture around combat prowess. They were 7 feet tall, naturally armored, and trained from childhood to fight. They had never asked another species for military advice until they met humanity. "Impossible," growled War Chief Thornax as he reviewed the Vega Prime records. "No species is naturally this good at warfare." His aide, a younger warrior named Korvek, disagreed. "Chief, what if they're not naturally good? What if they're trained to be this good?" The idea was revolutionary. Most species treated combat as an art or a cultural tradition. The Kitharans fought with honor and courage, following ancient codes of behavior. But the humans in the recordings fought like scientists, analyzing problems and implementing solutions with cold efficiency. War Chief Thornax made a decision that shocked his entire world. He requested human military advisors. The response came from the Human Colonial Administration. "We can send some retired Marines to help train your forces. Fair warning, our methods might seem unusual." 3 months later, Sergeant Major Patricia Wong stood before a formation of Catharan warriors on their training ground. She was a small woman by human standards, barely 5.5 feet tall. The Kitharans towered over her like living mountains. "I understand you folks are warriors," she said in accented galactic standard. "That's good. Warriors I can work with. But we're going to change how you think about fighting. The first lesson was simple: forget honor. Honor gets you killed, Wong explained as she demonstrated human combat techniques. Your job is to complete the mission and come home alive. Everything else is secondary. The Kitharans were horrified. Their entire martial culture was based on honorable single combat, facing enemies with courage, dying gloriously if necessary. Wong showed them recordings of human soldiers in action. Marines who used cover, struck from ambush, coordinated attacks with ruthless efficiency. There was nothing dishonorable about their tactics, but there was nothing traditional either. We don't fight fair, Wong said bluntly. Fair fights are for sports. War is about winning. The training was brutal. Wong taught them small unit tactics, combined arms coordination, and adaptive battlefield thinking. She broke down their instinctive fighting patterns and rebuilt them from the ground up. Stop thinking like individual warriors, she told them. Start thinking like parts of a weapon system. 6 months later, a Kitharan strike force using human training methods defeated a force 3 times their size in a border skirmish with the neighboring Zellan Empire. The victory was so complete that the Zellans requested immediate peace negotiations. How did you do it? Asked the Zellan ambassador during the ceasefire talks. War Chief Thornax looked uncomfortable. We learned new methods from human advisors. The ambassador's translator had trouble with the concept. You mean humans taught you to fight? They taught us to win. News of the Kitharan transformation spread through military circles across the galaxy. If humanity could teach the galaxy's natural warriors to be better at their own profession, what did that say about human capabilities? The answer came from an unexpected source. On the research station at Centauri Prime, Dr. Yalith was studying the human military data that had been collected since first contact. She was a xenobiologist, specializing in species development and evolution. Her analysis was meant to understand how humans had developed such effective combat capabilities. Her findings terrified the Council. Humans are not naturally better warriors than other species, she reported to the Assembly. They are naturally better at learning to be warriors. The distinction was important. Most species were either born fighters like the Kitharans or peaceful civilizers like the Aquarians. Humans seem to be born adapters. Their brains are structured for rapid pattern recognition and tactical flexibility. Dr. Yalith continued. They can learn any combat system and then improve it. More importantly, they can teach these improvements to others. Counselor Vex raised a tentacle. What are the implications? Any human military unit becomes more effective over time. They don't just maintain their skills, they develop new ones. And they share these developments across their entire military structure. The chamber was quiet as the implications sank in. Humanity's military advantage was not static. It was growing. But the real revelation came when Dr. Yalith presented her analysis of human military structure. Based on intercepted communications and observed deployment patterns, humans divide their military into distinct categories, she said. Regular forces handle conventional warfare. Special forces handle unconventional situations. What kind of unconventional situations? Asked General Korath. Unknown. Human special forces operations are classified at levels that our intelligence services cannot penetrate, but we can make inferences from their training patterns. The holographic display showed a comparison chart. Regular human forces trained for conventional combat scenarios, fighting other armies, defending positions, conducting standard military operations. Their training was intense but familiar. Special forces training was different. The data was fragmented, but it suggested preparation for situations that other species had never even considered. Combat in impossible environments. Warfare against non-standard opponents. Operations that violated normal tactical principles. In essence, Dr. Yalith concluded, humans have created military units specifically designed to handle problems that we don't know how to define. The implications were staggering. Humanity's regular forces were already superior to anything in the galaxy. Their special forces were apparently trained for threats that other species couldn't imagine. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some representatives wanted to demand more information about human special forces. Others suggested restrictions on human military activities. A few quietly wondered if they were already too late to contain humanity. The discussion was interrupted by an emergency alert. Priority communication from the Outer Rim, announced the session coordinator. Colony World Epsilon Eridani has gone silent. Last transmission reported contact with unknown vessels. This was not unusual. Colony worlds often experienced communication difficulties. The Council had standard procedures for such situations. Send an investigation team, establish contact, provide assistance if needed. But this time was different. Sir, the communication officer continued, the automated distress beacon contains a specific request for Council military assistance. The colony specifically asked for help dealing with what they described as non-standard hostile contact. General Korath stood up. I can have a hegemony guard battalion there in 2 weeks. Sir, there's more. We've intercepted human military communications about the same situation. They're dispatching a special forces team. Estimated arrival time is 4 days. The chamber went completely silent. Somewhere in the galaxy, there was a threat serious enough to require Council military intervention, and humanity was sending the mysterious special forces that no one understood. What are our orders? Asked the communication officer. Councillor Vex looked around the chamber. Every representative was thinking the same thing. This was their first chance to see human special forces in action. Dispatch our fastest ship to Epsilon Eridani, Vex decided. Observation mission only. They are not to interfere with human operations, but they should record everything. What if the humans request assistance? Then we provide it. But I doubt they will. 3 days later, the Council observation ship arrived at Epsilon Eridani to find a situation unlike anything in their records. The colony world was intact, but it was surrounded by vessels that defied classification. They were not ships in any traditional sense, more like living organisms that moved through space without apparent propulsion. And they were hostile. The colony's defensive systems had been overwhelmed in hours. The strange vessels had landed and deployed what could only be described as biological war machines. The human colonists were trapped in their settlements, fighting for survival against enemies that seemed to exist outside normal tactical parameters. This is why they called for special forces, realized Captain Valdris, the observation ship's commander. Regular forces wouldn't know how to handle this. 2 hours later, the human special forces team arrived. Captain Valdris had expected a large task force like the ones the Council would have sent. Instead, a single human ship entered the system. It was small, sleek, and completely unfamiliar in design. Council observation vessel, came a transmission from the human ship. This is Special Forces Team 7. We appreciate the backup, but you should maintain safe distance. We're going in hot. Team 7. A single team was going to handle a situation that had overwhelmed an entire colony's defenses. What happened next became classified at the highest levels of Council security. The official record stated only that the threat at Epsilon Eridani was neutralized with minimal casualties and no lasting damage to the colony. But Captain Valdris's personal log, discovered years later, told a different story. The human special forces team had landed and disappeared into the colony within minutes. For 6 hours there was no communication, no visible activity, nothing to suggest what they were doing. Then the alien vessels began dying. One by one, the strange biological ships stopped moving. Their war machines collapsed. The entire invasion force simply ceased to function, as if some vital connection had been severed. When it was over, the human team emerged from the colony and returned to their ship. They transmitted a brief message to both the colonists and the Council observers. Area secure. Threat neutralized. Resuming patrol duties. That was it. No explanation, no details, no request for support or recognition. They had faced an enemy unlike anything in galactic records and eliminated it in less than 8 hours. What did you see down there? Captain Valdris asked during the brief communication exchange. The reply came from someone who identified himself as Team 7's leader. His voice was calm, professional, and completely matter-of-fact. Non-standard biological incursion. Probably scouting force from outside the galaxy. Standard Special Forces response protocol. Nothing too challenging. Nothing too challenging. Captain Valdris stared at the recordings of the alien vessels and their war machines. This was a threat that would have required the entire Council fleet to handle, and these humans had dismissed it as routine. As both ships prepared to leave the system, Captain Valdris received one final transmission from the human Special Forces team. Thanks for keeping watch, Council ship. Glad you folks were here in case things got interesting. In case things got interesting. As if what they had just witnessed was boring. The Council observers returned to Centauri Prime with recordings that changed everything. Humanity's special forces were not just elite soldiers. They were something entirely new. Warriors trained to handle threats that no one else could even identify. And according to them, this had been a routine operation. Dr. Yaleth's follow-up report was brief but chilling. Based on observed performance at Epsilon Eridani, human special forces appear to be designed for warfare against opponents that operate outside normal physical and tactical parameters. The implications for galactic security are unprecedented. The Council faced a new reality. They shared the galaxy with a species whose regular military forces could conquer most known civilizations, and whose special forces were trained to fight enemies that existed beyond the edge of nightmares. And humanity considered both capabilities to be perfectly normal. The alarm bells at Council Central Command had not stopped ringing for 3 days. In the main operations center, holographic displays showed a nightmare spreading across the galaxy's outer rim. Red markers indicated lost systems. Yellow markers showed systems under attack. Green markers representing secure Council territory were disappearing one by one. Admiral Jektar stood before the main tactical display, his blue-scaled hands clasped behind his back. As the senior military commander for the Galactic Council, he had seen many threats over his long career. But nothing like this. Status report, he commanded. Major Jens, his intelligence officer, stepped forward with a data pad that glowed with urgent markers. 16 systems have gone completely silent in the past 72 hours. 23 more are reporting massive casualties and requesting immediate evacuation. The pattern is consistent across all affected areas. The Void Swarm, Jektar said quietly. The name sent a chill through the operations center. The Void Swarm was a legend, a story told to frighten children. Ancient records spoke of a machine intelligence from beyond the galaxy that had been defeated millennia ago. Most scholars believed it was mythology, but the evidence was overwhelming. The attacking forces matched ancient descriptions perfectly. Ships that were not ships but extensions of a single vast mind. Technology that consumed entire planets to fuel itself. A hunger that could only be satisfied by the complete destruction of all organic life. How long before they reached the core systems? Jektar asked. At current rate of advance, 18 days, Major Jens replied. Maybe less if they continue to accelerate. Admiral Jektar looked at the tactical display again. The Council's combined fleets were the most powerful military force in galactic history. Ships from 100 worlds crewed by warriors from dozens of species, armed with the best technology known science could produce. They had lasted exactly 6 hours against the Void Swarm's advanced scouts. Sir, came a voice from the communications station. Priority message from the First Fleet. Admiral Korwek is requesting immediate reinforcements. Jektar activated the communication link. Admiral Korwek appeared on the main screen, his usually pristine uniform torn and blackened. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship showed signs of heavy damage. Jektar, we can't stop them, Korwek said without preamble. I threw everything at their main force. Dreadnoughts, battle cruisers, fighter wings, everything. They just absorbed the damage and kept coming. Casualties, 70%. The survivors are falling back to defensive positions at Kepler Station, but it won't hold them for more than a few hours. Jektar closed his eyes. Korwek was one of the finest military minds in Council space. If he said the situation was hopeless, it probably was. Admiral, Korwek continued, we need to consider alternative options. Alternative options. Everyone in the operations center knew what that meant. Sir, Major Jens said quietly, there is one possibility. Speak. The humans, sir. Their military capabilities are... He paused, searching for the right words. Unprecedented. Jektar had been dreading this moment since the first reports came in. The Council had spent months debating humanity's place in the galaxy. Some saw them as valuable allies. Others viewed them as a potential threat, but no one questioned their effectiveness. Contact the human ambassador, Jektar ordered. Request an immediate meeting. Ambassador Sarah Mitchell arrived at Council headquarters within hours. She was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and tired eyes, the kind of diplomat who had spent her career dealing with complicated situations. But when she entered the operations center and saw the tactical displays, her expression became very serious. Admiral, she said after reviewing the situation reports. How can humanity help? We need military assistance, Jektar replied bluntly. The Council's fleets cannot handle this threat. Your forces might be able to make a difference. Ambassador Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical data. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that had not been there before. "Admiral, this is not a situation for our regular forces. I don't understand. The Void Swarm operates outside normal tactical parameters. It's not a conventional enemy that can be defeated through superior firepower or better tactics. This requires special forces." There it was. The mysterious human special forces that had become the subject of fearful speculation throughout the galaxy. "Can you contact them?" Jektar asked. "They're already on the way." The response surprised everyone in the operations center. "Already on the way?" "We've been tracking the Void Swarm's return for several months," Ambassador Mitchell explained. "Our deep space monitoring stations detected the first incursions into this galaxy. Special forces teams have been preparing for this scenario." "You knew this was coming and didn't warn us?" "We weren't certain until 3 days ago. And frankly, there was nothing conventional forces could do to prepare for this kind of threat." Admiral Jektar felt a mixture of anger and relief. Anger that humanity had kept such critical information secret. Relief that they apparently had a plan. "What do your special forces need from us?" "Stay out of their way," Ambassador Mitchell said simply. "And be prepared to evacuate civilian populations from the outer rim systems. This is going to get worse before it gets better." 2 days later, the human Special Forces fleet arrived at the edge of Council space. Admiral Jektar had expected something impressive, but what he saw defied his understanding of military science. The fleet consisted of 12 ships, each one completely unlike anything in the known galaxy. They were not built for conventional warfare. They were sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed to shift and adapt even as he watched them through long-range sensors. "Admiral," Major Jens reported, "the human ships are not responding to standard communication protocols. They're using some kind of encrypted system that our computers cannot decode. Keep trying." An hour later, they received a response, but it did not come through normal communication channels. Instead, a message appeared directly on Admiral Jektar's personal terminal, bypassing all security systems. "Council Forces, this is Special Forces Command. We appreciate your assistance in civilian evacuation efforts. Military operations will commence in 6 hours. Recommend all Council fleets maintain minimum distance of 5 light-years from Void Swarm positions." 5 light-years? That was not a safe distance. That was a different star system. Major Jens sent a response. "Ask them what kind of military operations they're planning." "Sir, I've been trying to send responses for the past hour. Their communication system is not accepting incoming messages." Before Admiral Jektar could reply, another message appeared on his terminal. "Council Command, if you're reading this, it means you're trying to communicate with us. Please understand that our operational security requires communication blackout during active missions. We'll provide updates as the situation develops. Trust us, we've done this before." They had done this before. The Void Swarm was supposed to be a legendary threat that appeared once every 1,000 years. How had humanity dealt with it before? The answer came in the form of historical records that Ambassador Mitchell provided. During an emergency briefing, "The Void Swarm has attacked our galaxy 3 times in recorded history," she explained to the assembled council leadership. "Each time they were eventually defeated, but the records are unclear about how." "What do you mean, unclear?" "The records were classified and stored in our Special Forces archives. Even I don't have access to the complete files. But what I can tell you is that humanity has been preparing for the Swarm's return for over 200 years. 200 years. Humanity had been planning for this threat since before they made contact with the Council." "What kind of preparations?" asked Counselor Vex. "I don't know the details. But I can tell you that our Special Forces units are specifically trained and equipped for warfare against non-standard opponents. The Void Swarm qualifies as non-standard." Non-standard. Admiral Jektar was beginning to hate that word. The first phase of human operations began 6 hours later, exactly as promised. Admiral Jektar watched through long-range sensors as the 12 human ships approached the Void Swarm's main force. The swarm had grown since its arrival in Council space. What had started as a few dozen vessels had become a massive cloud of interconnected machines that stretched across several light hours. It moved like a living thing, consuming everything in its path and using the resources to build more of itself. The human ships disappeared into the swarm cloud. For 12 hours, there was no communication, no visible activity, nothing to indicate what was happening inside the massive enemy formation. Council sensors could not penetrate the swarm's interference field. All they could do was wait. Then the swarm began to change. It started as small irregularities in the cloud's movement pattern. Sections that had been perfectly coordinated began operating independently. Parts of the formation started moving in different directions, as if the swarm's central coordination was being disrupted. "What are they doing in there?" wondered Major Jens. They got their answer when the first human status report arrived. "Council Command, this is SF Team Alpha. Phase 1 complete. We've successfully infiltrated swarm network nodes and planted disruption packages. Initiating Phase 2. Infiltrated. The humans had not attacked the void swarm. They had snuck inside it. Over the next 24 hours, the reports continued to arrive. SF Team Beta reporting. Command Node 7 neutralized. Local swarm units showing signs of independent behavior. SF Team Gamma. Package deployment successful. Swarm communication network experiencing cascade failures. SF Team Delta. Primary hive mind interface located. Beginning surgical strike. Admiral Jektar realized that humanity was not fighting the void swarm in any conventional sense. They were performing some kind of technological surgery, cutting into the enemy's command structure and disrupting it from within. But the most disturbing reports came from the teams that were not involved in the technical operations. SF Team Epsilon. Psychological warfare protocols initiated. Swarm intelligence showing signs of emotional distress. Emotional distress. The void swarm was a machine intelligence. It was not supposed to have emotions. SF Team Zeta. Counterintelligence operation successful. Swarm hive mind attempting to communicate. Translation protocols active. The void swarm was trying to communicate with the humans who were systematically destroying it. Admiral Jektar requested clarification on this point, but the response was not reassuring. Council Command, this is SF Team Leader. Swarm intelligence is experiencing something analogous to fear. This is normal for operations against hive mind opponents. Phase 3 will commence when psychological preparation is complete. Fear. The humans were making the void swarm afraid. Phase 3 began 36 hours after the initial infiltration. Admiral Jektar watched through sensors as the massive swarm cloud began to contract, pulling its scattered units back together. But this was not a tactical withdrawal. This was panic. All swarm units are retreating toward the galactic edge, Major Jens reported. They're abandoning their advanced positions and running. Running from what? The answer came in the form of a final message from the human Special Forces. Council Command, this is Special Forces Command. Mission accomplished. Void Swarm Intelligence has been convinced that continued operations in this galaxy will result in its complete destruction. It is withdrawing to extragalactic space and will not return. How did you convince it? We showed it what happens to hive minds that threaten humanity. Admiral Jektar stared at the message, trying to understand what the humans had done. They had not destroyed the void swarm through superior firepower. They had not outmaneuvered it through clever tactics. They had terrified it into leaving. Sir, Major Jens said quietly, there's one more message coming in. The final transmission was brief but chilling. Council Forces, this is Special Forces Team Leader. The void swarm has departed galactic space and will not return. However, it has transmitted a general warning about humanity to all machine intelligences in the local galactic group. We recommend that the Council prepare for possible contact with other artificial species, seeking information about human capabilities. Standard response should be, we suggest you find a different galaxy. The Operations Center was silent for a long time after that message. Finally, Counselor Vex, who had been observing the entire operation, spoke up. Admiral, what exactly did we just witness? Admiral Jektar looked at the tactical display, which now showed clear space where the void swarm had been. I think we just saw humanity fight a war that we didn't know was possible. What do you mean? They didn't just defeat the enemy. They fought the enemy's mind. They made a machine intelligence experience fear and convinced it that resistance was futile. The implications were staggering. Humanity's special forces were not just trained for unusual combat situations. They were trained for warfare against opponents that existed on completely different levels of reality. Sir, Major Jens interrupted, we're receiving a transmission from Ambassador Mitchell. The human diplomat appeared on the main screen, looking tired but satisfied. Admiral, I hope the Council is pleased with the resolution of this crisis. Our Special Forces teams are returning to their normal patrol duties. Normal patrol duties? Deep space monitoring, threat assessment, that sort of thing. They handle situations that our regular forces aren't equipped for. Ambassador, I have to ask, what did your special forces do to the Void Swarm? They explained the consequences of continued aggression against human-protected space. In what way? By demonstrating humanity's historical responses to existential threats, the swarm's intelligence concluded that discretion was the better part of valor. Historical responses to existential threats. Admiral Jektar realized that humanity had dealt with threats like the Void Swarm before, and that those encounters had not ended well for the threats. Ambassador, one final question. Your special forces mentioned other machine intelligences. Should the Council be concerned? Ambassador Mitchell's expression became very serious. Admiral, the galaxy is a big place and not all of its inhabitants are friendly. Humanity's special forces exist to handle the threats that conventional military forces cannot manage. The fact that they exist should be reassuring to the Council. And if we encounter threats that even your special forces cannot handle, then we'll develop new kinds of special forces. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Jektar alone with his thoughts. Humanity had just saved the galaxy from an ancient threat using methods that defied understanding. Their special forces had fought a war against the enemy's mind and won. And according to them, this was just another day at the office. The Council would have to completely reevaluate their understanding of warfare, threats, and the nature of security, in a galaxy that contained humanity. But one thing was clear: they never wanted to be on the wrong side of human special forces. 3 months after the Void Swarm crisis, Admiral Jektar received an invitation that changed his understanding of the universe. The message appeared on his personal terminal without going through any of the usual security protocols. A signature trait of human special forces communication. Admiral Jektar, you are invited to observe Special Forces Training Exercise Omega-7. This exercise demonstrates capabilities relevant to galactic security. Observer status approved by Council Security Committee. Transport will arrive at your convenience. Admiral Jektar stared at the message for a long time. Since the Void Swarm incident, he had been asking questions about human special forces. Most of those questions had been politely deflected or classified beyond his security clearance. But this invitation suggested that humanity was ready to reveal some of their secrets. 2 days later, a human ship arrived at Council headquarters. It was unlike any vessel in the Council databases, sleek, organic-looking, and completely silent as it moved through space. When Admiral Jektar boarded, he was greeted by a woman in simple black fatigues. Admiral, I'm Colonel Rebecca Chen. Welcome aboard the Silent Thunder. Colonel Chen, thank you for this opportunity. I admit I'm curious about what we're going to observe. Training exercise for our newest Special Forces unit. They're being prepared for deep space assignments. The ship's interior was as unusual as its exterior. Corridors that seemed to shift configuration based on need. Computer systems that responded to thought as much as voice commands. Crew members who moved with the same fluid efficiency that Admiral Jektar had observed in all human military personnel. How long until we arrive at the training area? He asked. We're already there, Colonel Chen replied. Admiral Jektar looked out the nearest viewport and saw empty space. No planets, no stations, nothing but stars in the distance. I don't see anything. You will. As if summoned by her words, structures began to appear around them. Not built structures, organic ones. Massive entities that looked like living ships but moved with intelligence and purpose. They surrounded the Silent Thunder in a complex formation that seemed to shift and adapt constantly. What are those? Admiral Jektar asked. Training partners, Colonel Chen replied calmly. Artificial life forms designed to simulate threats that don't exist yet. Threats that don't exist yet. Admiral Jektar was getting tired of trying to understand human military thinking. Colonel, what kind of threats don't exist yet? The kind that might evolve from current threats or develop from technological advancement, or emerge from places we haven't explored yet. Special Forces training has to prepare for possibilities, not just realities. They were led to an observation deck with a perfect view of the surrounding space. Admiral Jektar watched as human soldiers began deploying from hidden positions throughout the area. But these were not the Marines he had observed on Vega Prime, or even the Special Forces teams that had handled the Void Swarm. These soldiers moved differently. They seemed to phase in and out of normal space, appearing and disappearing without explanation. Their equipment was unlike anything he had ever seen. Weapons that bent reality, armor that adapted to any environment, communication systems that worked across dimensions. What unit is this? He asked. Experimental Special Forces. Unit designation is classified, but we call them the Deep Patrol. What do they patrol? Places that other people can't go. Admiral Jektar was about to ask for clarification when the training exercise began. The artificial life form suddenly became aggressive, launching attacks that defied physical laws. They fired weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They moved through solid matter like it was empty space. They coordinated their assaults using communication methods that seemed to operate outside normal space-time. The human soldiers responded with tactics that made no sense. They fought battles in dimensions that Admiral Jektar could not see. They used weapons that targeted concepts rather than physical objects. They communicated through methods that seemed to involve shared consciousness, and they won. One by one, the artificial opponents were neutralized. Not destroyed, neutralized. They simply stopped existing in any way that mattered. How? Admiral Jektar asked. They convinced the artificial life forms that they never existed in the first place, Colonel Chen explained. It's the advanced form of reality warfare. Reality warfare. Admiral Jektar realized that he was completely out of his depth. Colonel, I need to understand something. The Marines we observed on Vega Prime, the Special Forces teams that handled the Void Swarm, and now these Deep Patrol units. Are they all part of the same military organization? Different levels of the same concept, Colonel Chen replied. Regular forces handle conventional threats. Special Forces handle unconventional threats. Deep Patrol handles impossible threats. What's the difference? Regular forces fight enemies that follow physical laws. Special Forces fight enemies that ignore physical laws. Deep Patrol fights enemies that exist outside physical laws entirely. Admiral Jektar felt something cold settle in his chest. Colonel, what kind of enemy exists outside physical laws? The kind that creates physical laws in the first place. Before Admiral Jektar could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. But these were not warning alarms, they were notification signals. What's happening? Real mission alert, Colonel Chen said, her expression becoming serious. Deep Patrol has been activated for an actual operation. They hurried to the command center, where holographic displays showed a region of space that Admiral Jektar did not recognize. It was not empty space, it was something that had never been space, where the normal rules of reality simply did not apply. What am I looking at? Incursion from outside our reality framework, explained the ship's captain. Something is trying to enter our universe from a place where our universe doesn't exist. Is that possible? Unfortunately, yes. It happens about once every few centuries. Usually the incursions collapse on their own because they can't maintain existence in our reality framework. But sometimes they need help collapsing. And that's what Deep Patrol does, among other things. Admiral Jektar watched as the Experimental Special Forces unit prepared for immediate deployment. Their equipment changed as he watched, adapting to meet requirements that he could not understand. The soldiers themselves seemed to become less solid, as if they were preparing to exist in multiple realities simultaneously. How do you fight something that doesn't exist in your reality? He asked. You meet it in the reality where it does exist, Colonel Chen replied, and then you convince it that your reality is better. The Deep Patrol unit deployed in a way that made Admiral Jektar's eyes hurt to watch. They simply stepped out of normal space and into the region where the incursion was occurring. For a moment, he could see them fighting something that his mind refused to process. Then they disappeared entirely. Where did they go? Somewhere else. They'll be back when the job is done. How long will that take? Time doesn't work normally where they went. Could be minutes, could be years, could be never, if they don't experience sequential existence while they're there. Admiral Jektar sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Everything he thought he understood about military operations, about warfare, about the nature of reality itself, was proving to be inadequate. Colonel, I need to ask you something directly. What is humanity? Colonel Chen was quiet for a long time, considering her response. Admiral, do you know why humans developed such effective military capabilities? Superior training methods? Necessity. Earth is a hostile world in a hostile universe. For millions of years, humans had to fight for survival against threats that other species never encountered. What kind of threats? Everything. Environmental disasters that could destroy continents, predators that hunted in packs and used tools, diseases that evolved specifically to kill intelligent life, ice ages that lasted for thousands of years, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, solar radiation, and that was just the natural threats. Admiral Jektar began to understand. You developed military capabilities to fight your own planet, and each other. Humans spent thousands of years fighting wars against other humans. We developed tactics for every possible scenario because we had to. Survival required it. But that explains conventional military capability. What about special forces? Colonel Chen's expression became darker. Admiral, Earth's history includes some things that are not in our official records. Threats that most humans don't know about. Things that required unconventional responses. Such as artificial intelligences that tried to eliminate biological life. Extra-dimensional entities that fed unconscious minds. Time-traveling predators from possible futures. Reality viruses that could destroy the concept of existence itself. Admiral Jektar stared at her. Those things actually happened? Multiple times. And each time humanity developed new methods to deal with them. That's why we have special forces units that most people don't know about. We learned that conventional threats are just the beginning. The conversation was interrupted by a sound that Admiral Jektar could not describe. It was not quite music, not quite noise, but something that seemed to affect reality directly. They're coming back, Colonel Chen said. The Deep Patrol Unit materialized in the command center, but they were different than when they had left. They moved like people who had experienced things that changed their fundamental understanding of existence. Mission accomplished, reported their team leader, a young woman who looked tired in ways that went beyond physical exhaustion. The incursion has been convinced to exist somewhere else. Casualties? Colonel Chen asked. Temporal displacement for Johnson and Martinez. They'll be back next week, last Tuesday. Thompson experienced existential uncertainty, but he'll recover once he remembers how to be himself. Admiral. Jektar realized that he was listening to a conversation about military operations that violated everything he thought he knew about how reality worked. Admiral, Colonel Chen said, turning to him. I think you have enough information to make your report to the Council. What exactly am I supposed to report? That humanity's military capabilities exist on multiple levels, designed to handle different categories of threat. Regular forces handle conventional military situations. Special forces handle unconventional situations. Deep Patrol handles impossible situations. And beyond that? Colonel Chen smiled, but it was not a reassuring expression. Admiral, we're currently developing capabilities for situations that are worse than impossible. Threats that could emerge from the spaces between realities, or from the time before time existed, or from the places where mathematics breaks down. What do you call those units? That's classified. But the working designation is absolute response. Admiral Jektar returned to Council headquarters with a report that he knew no one would believe. He had witnessed military capabilities that existed beyond the edge of conventional understanding. Humanity had developed responses to threats that other species could not even imagine. His final report to the Council was brief but comprehensive. Humanity's military organization operates on multiple levels of reality. Their regular forces are capable of conquering most known civilizations. Their special forces are capable of handling threats that exist outside normal tactical parameters. Their experimental units are capable of operations that violate fundamental laws of physics and logic. Recommendation: the Council should never, under any circumstances, take any action that could be interpreted as hostile by humanity. We share the galaxy with a species that has developed military responses to threats that we cannot comprehend. Additional recommendation: if the Council encounters any threat that our combined forces cannot handle, immediately request human assistance. Based on observed capabilities, there is no threat that humanity has not already prepared to face. The report was classified at the highest levels of Council security, but word spread through unofficial channels. Every species in the galaxy began to understand that humanity was not just another member of the galactic community. They were the guarantee that the galactic community would continue to exist. 6 months later, the Council received a final message from humanity's Special Forces Command. Council Forces, this is Deep Space Patrol Command. Our exploration units have detected signs of activity in the void between galaxies. Unknown entities are beginning to take interest in our local cluster. We are deploying absolute response units for preliminary contact. Recommend all Council forces maintain standard operations and do not attempt to assist unless specifically requested. We've handled this kind of situation before. Admiral Jektar read the message and felt a mixture of relief and terror. Somewhere beyond the edge of the galaxy, humanity was preparing to face threats that existed beyond the boundaries of imagination, and they were confident they could win. The galaxy was safe, protected by a species that had turned warfare into a science and survival into an art form. But Admiral Jektar could not shake the feeling that humanity's greatest battles were still ahead of them. In the spaces between realities, in the time before time, in the places where mathematics failed and logic collapsed, humanity was building defenses against threats that had not yet learned to exist. And somewhere in the deep void, ancient intelligences that had watched galaxies burn and universes collapse were receiving warnings from their agents. Avoid the local group. The humans are there. The council decided that some questions were better left unasked.